Far away in the southwest Pacific, about 2,000 kilometres east of Australia and across the Tasman Sea, lies New Zealand. It consists of two main islands, the north and the south, with many smaller islands offshore. Because of its remoteness, it was effectively the last large uninhabited landmass settled in the world. Today, New Zealand has a population of about 5 million, but with an area slightly larger than the United Kingdom. New Zealand's about 18,000 kilometres from Scotland, and it's a journey not to be undertaken lightly, but it is well worth the effort. There are spectacular mountains and glaciers, picturesque fjords, vast plains, rolling hillsides and subtropical forests. There's volcanoes and miles of gorgeous coastline. There is something for everyone. Most visitors will arrive in Auckland, the biggest city with over 1.6 million people in its sprawling suburbs. Offshore is Rangitoto, a volcanic island no more than 1,000 years old. The best way to get your bearings is to visit the Sky Tower, which is 328 metres high and was completed in 1997. There's 1,267 steps to the top, but the lift will whisk you up at 32 kilometres an hour. The tower was built for communications and as an observation platform, and is complete with a restaurant and a casino. Whatever, it more or less sums up New Zealanders, or the Kiwis as they're known. They just like to be laid back and keep their life work in balance. Not far from Auckland City is this charming village of Puhoi, which was settled in 1863 by Bohemians. In 1983, the Puhoi Village Cheese Company was set up and now employs over 80 people. All around New Zealand are many established vineyards. A wineries tour is the perfect way to spend an afternoon. Just make sure you have a capable driver and don't have too many samples. Leaving Auckland and heading south on State Highway number 1, a 3-hour drive will take you to Lake Taupo. The lake was formed by the caldera of the Taupo volcano, and it's the biggest lake in New Zealand, being roughly the size of Singapore. As you head south from the lake, you enter the Tongariro National Park, in the middle of a true wilderness wonderland. Mount Tongariro is 1,978 metres high and last exploded in November 2012. From the edge of the footpath, you can clearly see the extent of these recent eruptions. From Wakapapa village, a 2-hour trail takes you to the Taranaki Falls. Avoiding the main roads on my journey south, I spent a night in this town at Rutihi before following the Wanganui River to the west coast. Rutihi was established in 1893 and reflects its pioneering history as a former timber town. Its wide streets contain what is the oldest theatre in New Zealand, built in 1915 but now in some need of refurbishment. I felt the whole town was like something out of the American Midwest. Time to leave Rutihi and follow the Wanganui River to the west coast. The Wanganui River is New Zealand's third largest river, with a length of 290 kilometres. That's twice the size of our River Tweed. Rising on the slopes of Mount Tongariro, it flows southwards through some spectacular country and past some unusual settlements, including the village of Jerusalem, before reaching the coast. I couldn't resist a stop in Jerusalem. The village is named after the biblical Jerusalem, and this church is the Sisters of Compassion, which was dedicated in 1893. Looks like our journey is going to be delayed. We're stuck behind some sheep on the road. No matter, we'll catch up again in Wellington in our next chapter. Wellington lies at the very southern tip of the North Island. It is of course New Zealand's capital city and has a population of about 420,000 residents. Strong winds through the Cook Straits give it the nickname Windy Wellington. There are plenty of unusual things to look at in Wellington, like this sculpture above the library, or this sign telling motorists to stay alert at intersections. Cuba Street is Wellington's own little piece of Bohemia. Here you'll find vintage shops and restaurants, and strangely odd crossing signs. The red man changes to a green transvestite, and the next red man is a Maori doing a haka, and it changes to a green elegantly dressed lady. No trip to the city would be complete without a ride on the cable car. The Wellington cable car was designed by James Fulton and opened in 1902. It's about 700 metres in length and rises over 120 metres at an average gradient of 1 in 5. There are great views from the top and easy access to the Cable Car Museum, the Botanical Gardens and the Carter Observatory. This building, in central Wellington, houses the Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa as it's known, and it opened in 1998. Inside, you really can't miss Gallipoli, the scale of our war, and that tells a story of the atrocity through the eyes and words of 8 ordinary New Zealanders. Each is captured frozen in a moment of time on a monumental scale, 2.5 times human size. In total, 2,779 Kiwis lost their lives at Gallipoli, and many others were scarred forever. The exhibition is harrowing, emotional and powerful. You cannot fail to be moved by it. The tradition of motorists beeping their horns as they drive through the Mount Victoria Tunnel has become a city-wide superstition. Many residents believe a jaunty toot either wards off evil spirits or acknowledges the memory of a teenage girl who was murdered and whose body was buried at the site a year before the tunnel was opened in 1931. A more peaceful trip now, as we head over towards the east coast. Looking back at this day, I do think my children were trying to kill me off, what with climbing up pinnacles, step after step up to a lighthouse, and then to the top of these cliffs. But they did offer to carry my bag, so they're not so bad. We're going to leave the North Island now and head across the Cook Straits from Wellington to Picton. The ferry journey takes round about 3 hours, but don't make too much noise because it seems those looking after you on your journey are fast asleep. Safely ashore, we drive to Nelson, a small city facing the Tasman Bay and named after Admiral Horatio Nelson. Nelson is well known for its thriving arts and crafts scene, but it's probably better known for being the centre of New Zealand. The Centre of New Zealand monument doesn't actually mark the geographic centre, although it's close, but it actually records the 00 reference point to which the first mapping surveys of New Zealand were referenced. From Nelson, it's a drive back to Picton to join the Coastal Pacific, a scenic long-distance train to Christchurch, where my next adventure begins. All aboard for Part 3. Christchurch is the largest city in the South Island and lies on the east coast, surrounded by the expansive Canterbury Plains. In 2011, many of the city's historic stone buildings, including the famous cathedral, were destroyed in a major earthquake. However, in typical Kiwi fashion, everything's going to be alright. And this transitional, or cardboard cathedral as it's known, was built as a temporary replacement. Close by is an unofficial memorial consisting of 185 empty white chairs, each representing one of the individuals who perished in the earthquake in 2011. No city tour would be complete without a tram ride or a visit to the famous Hagley Park. Flat-bottomed punts glide along the River Avon, which flows through the city centre and the adjacent botanical gardens. So join me as I venture on an extreme tour around the South Island. I was rather apprehensive joining this bunch of fellow travellers, as I seemed to bring up the average age by several decades. No matter, our guide Baby Jesus, so named because of his long hair and dislike of shoes, made us all welcome and let us try out all manner of exploits from our bucket lists. There are hills to climb, gorge walks, mountain bike rides, canyons to descend, helicopter flights, glacier treks, and transalpine train journeys. I just can't wait. Our first stop is Lake Tekapo. This lake has this turquoise colour owing to the glacial meltwater which finds its way down from the southern Alps. This is Mackenzie country, where the Church of the Good Shepherd stands on the edge of the lake. Built in 1935 as a memorial church to commemorate early settlers, it's one of New Zealand's iconic photo locations. Our route to Queenstown goes through the Lindis Pass. This pass rises to 970 metres above sea level, about 3,000 feet. Off to Queenstown now, a real adrenaline junkie's paradise. These peaks are known as the Remarkables. Located on the southeast shore of Wakatipu, they're so called because this range of mountains runs almost exactly north to south. You'll see from this sign that New Zealand doesn't enjoy the freedom that ramblers have here in Scotland. The signs serve to remind me not to take for granted our right to roam. Now for some real fun, a ride up on the gondola to the top and a luge run back down. We stopped off in the village of Cardrona for a refreshment on our way across the Harris Mountains. It's amazing how many Scottish place names have been used in New Zealand. Our ancestors must have missed the old country when they settled New Zealand back in the 19th century. And if you look closely at a map, you'll find many names from the borders: Cardrona, Lauder, Roxburgh, Berwick, Ettrick, Heriot, and you'll even find Sutra and a Pinocchio. So, here it is, the famous Wanaka tree, a 100-year-old willow standing in Lake Wanaka. It seems the tree started its life as a fence post and simply grew up in the lake to become another of New Zealand's iconic photo shots. And for my next adventure, I turn up at the Wanaka Flying School for my first ever flying lesson. The plane is a Cessna 172 Skyhawk. It's tiny, it's a fixed-wing aircraft only 27 feet long, 9 feet high, and has a 36-foot wingspan with a maximum airspeed of 150 miles an hour. It was a wonderful experience. I didn't expect to get to take off, fly and land the plane on my first lesson, but I got back safely, thanks to my instructor, Mr. Fox Lee. We're heading off for a first-hand exploration of the Franz Josef Glacier by helicopter. From our Franz Josef village base, we fly up and land on the 12-kilometre long glacier. Fully equipped with glacier boots and crampons, we walk up, through and onto the glacier for about a couple of hours. We've been warned that if the helicopter can't fly us back because of adverse weather, we may need to spend a night out on the glacier. Brrr. The helicopter returns to the glacier to pick us all up. The flight back takes only a few minutes, but the helicopter flies perilously close to the edge of the valley. The landing ground is in sight now. And we safely touch down back at base. From the Franz Josef Glacier, we now follow State Highway number 6 to Greymouth. That's where we'll take the Transalpine train, back to Christchurch. But that's really the next chapter. Transalpine is one of the world's great train journeys and covers 140 miles, taking around 5 hours to make the journey from Greymouth to Christchurch. It traverses the South Island's stunning mountains and crosses the vast Canterbury Plains. The train stops briefly at Arthur's Pass. At 737 metres above sea level, it's the highest station on the rail network.